Okay, so welcome back to the last video for introduction to full stack and multi-tier development for C#. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk to you a little bit about kind of the state of applications as we know it right now, and then talk about how we can start actually segmenting code into layers using Visual Studio. So here what I have is kind of the original incarnation of our main window for the help desk application. And so in the right hand side you see I have one project, and that one project is a WPF project that contains all of the code for this application. However, you can see that I have a directory in here that has all the view models, and what may be beneficial for me to do is take these view models and actually abstract those away from this one file and put them into a library so I can actually start using those view models with various versions of a front end. So I could have multiple WPF apps, I could have multiple applications that aren't necessarily even WPF that could have access to these view models. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk to you a little bit about this original implementation of help desk. So if you go into this thing, into bin, what you will likely see is there is nothing once you download it. If I go up here and I debug, or I build and rebuild, and I go back to my original, go to help desk, go to bin, go debug. Now I have these three files. So these three files, this one right here is a troubleshooting file that gives you basically this symbol table information that you can use to attach a debugger. This is just a configuration file that has a configuration that you can access from the application. And this exe is an executable that you can actually run natively on the Windows operating system. And so all of the code, regardless of where it is in this tree, is in this exe file. So while there are lots and lots and lots of files associated with this thing, I can run this just by double-clicking the exe file. So when I double-click, what will happen is after a while, Windows will create exactly the window that we saw at the end of last week's video. So this is the application. I can add new stuff. I can do whatever we want. So if I run, what's happening is it is building a new version of that file and automatically running, and I have this weird thing up here. And so this is the just-in-time debugger tools for WPF from Visual Studio. And as you saw in the previous example, I did not have that when I ran it from the bin directly. So this situation is exactly what you would do if somebody had purchased this piece of software. You would send them this file, you would potentially send them the config file. And so then they would double click the exe, they would not have the debugging information, and it would just sort of work like Word or like Excel or any other application worked in days of old. So the thing that we've been talking about this week is really about how to decentralize all of this code. So we have a situation here where essentially these view models are stuck inside of this executable. And actually there is a tool called .peek from JetBrains. If you ever use PyCharm, it's the exact same people. And you can take this executable and you can drag and drop it into .peek, and it will actually decompile that executable, and it will show you that our view models are indeed trapped inside of this executable. So if I wanted to build a new WPF app, or I wanted to build a Xamarin a mobile device app, and I wanted access to these view models, it would not be possible. I would have to somehow grant those other applications access to this application, and you could sideload the applications or something like that, but it would be kind of difficult. So rather than have this situation, what I would prefer to have is I would prefer to move these view models into a library that I can reference from whatever WPF app I like, or from a Xamarin app or whatever. So this is the old version of the application. I can close that. I will show you the new version of the application. I have now two of these solutions. So the top one is just a WPF application that we have seen before. The bottom one is actually a library project. And so if you right-click on Solution and you go to Add, you can add a new project. And you can add as many class libraries as you want. So you could add multiple class libraries, and each time you add a class library, what is actually happening under the covers is it is creating a new folder in here for each of the projects. If I go into the services.helpdesk library, so services.helpdesk library, I say view models. These are the C# files that I migrated into this new project. But more importantly, I have a bin directory, I have a debug directory, and I have the services.helpdesk.dll. So if I go back to .peek and I remove this from the list, I actually can remove all of these from the list. I care about the help desk bin debug executable. And you'll see here, I do not have view models anymore. I only have the properties and I have the actual help desk itself. And so here I have classes for a main window, and you can see these are just the click handlers on the sort of automatically generated class behind the window, but I do not see my view models anymore. If, however, I go to help desk, services help desk, bin debug, and drag DLL into here, I do have my view models, and inside of this I have various enums and view model classes and whatever. And so now what I can do is I can take this DLL and I can reference this DLL in whatever other project I want. And so now I have decoupled or decentralized my view model logic from my UI, and I have made it possible that I can actually use this DLL with services that exist on the server far, far away from the user's local machine. At the same time, code on the local machine can use the same view models by simply referencing the DLL. So the final kind of piece to this is, how does one reference a DLL in Visual Studio? So here what you'll find is if you go through the exercise of trying to move the references from help desk, and you literally just right-click cut and right-click paste into help desk, what will happen is everything will break. You won't be able to do your run anymore. This won't work. It'll actually throw a bunch of compilation errors. And the reason is you won't have this reference, services.helpdesk. So if you right-click on references, you can add a reference, and you can do this in two ways. First, if it's a project that's in the same solution, you can check the checkbox, and this is a nice function or feature, because as long as this is checked, if I make updates to these view models and I build them, this reference will be referencing the brand new library. We won't have to do anything, copying files, and all that stuff will be automatically done for you. If you want to use a more interesting approach, you can browse, and you can actually go to downloads, and you can go to help desk, you go to this, to bin, to debug, and then actually reference this DLL. And obviously you don't have to reference it from the bin. You could save this off somewhere, and then you would be looking at that version of the bin. Even if I modified the code, it would not be pointed to the file that gets rebuilt every time. So either you can reference a project that is in the same solution, or you can reference a file. Then as long as you're referencing the file, you'll have access to all of the code that is in that file, as you can see through the debugger, or the decompilation app. So all of that to say, if you want to build multi-tiered applications, it's really, really important that you start thinking about how to decentralize code so that you can reuse it as the easiest that you possibly can. So when we start building the ABET application next week, what we're actually going to do is we're going to go and make a completely new solution And that completely new solution will have something like a WPF solution will actually be a website front-end or web app front-end solution. And then we'll also have a services layer implemented as a library that is then referenced by that application. And what that does is it allows us to deploy these services DLLs, so we can reference it in both the client side, and we can reference it in the server side code that we're writing. Now, realizing that if you're building something in HTML5 and JavaScript on the client side, you won't necessarily need access to these DLLs, but this is how you kind of decentralize in terms of physical files. You can actually build as many files as you want, recognizing that each of these solutions is going to result in one file. So I could have 13 different libraries here, and each of those would build one library for a total of 13 libraries, each of which would have the various classes inside of it. So that's how you add various solutions to an overall project. You can also add database projects, which we will talk about when we talk about persistence. So Visual Studio basically allows you to go full stack, top to bottom, database all the way to UI, right in Visual Studio by adding additional projects to your solution. And then you can manage all of that by setting which of these things should be the startup project. So here you can see that help desk is bolded and services.help desk is not bolded. That's because if you right click here, this is set as the startup project. And so when I click start, it's actually going to use this solution's main method or main entry point to actually generate the application. And so if I run this thing, even if it's completely different now over here, and I've demonstrated through .peek that the code is segmented, it still runs exactly the same as it did before. So I have not fundamentally done anything to the application, but what I've done is decentralized the business logic, so now I can reuse this business logic wherever I like, and I don't have to have it married to the executable here. So we will see this kind of stuff all over the place starting next week, and I just wanted to give you a really quick sort of precursory introduction to how to add multiple solutions and kind of what that means in terms of physical files. And so next week we're going to start actually building an HTML front end for our application, and then we're going to show how we can go from the front end to a C# intermediary, and then all the way down to a Microsoft SQL database, all in the same Visual Studio project. So thanks for tuning in, and I will see you at the meeting tomorrow. I appreciate your attention, and please let me know if you have any questions, comments, concerns about the video. You can always email me, and I will email you right back. Thanks.